we heard about what are the challenges, and I always ask myself, what is where the automation starts, when zero-touch automation starts, when it finishes. So I have a son, 10 years old, and he's playing Fortnite. As most of you guys know, this is the game right now to play. So every now and then he's having an issue with with the telecom service provider we are having. So I have to call them. It takes them 5 days to repair the service, and that's the time where our house turns into not heaven. Let's put it this way. So it's a very challenging environment for a 10 years old to understand, coming from the iPhone, iPad background and being able to do everything in the touch screen, to try to make him understand what is the difference between telco service provider and a Google service provider. So hyperscale companies, they need only 3 engineers for 10,000 devices, and an average service provider requires 300 engineers to maintain actually a network. So it's really not equal opportunity for service providers, and understand the complexity of the networks, and what they deal with is completely different than what Google or hyperscale companies are doing today. So the question is, I think that was a question I asked before, is automation is necessity right now? I would argue we don't have to wait for 5G, and I would argue that even with heavily historically grown networks, we need to have automation today. So again, if you look at the numbers that speaks volume. In average, we are talking about, and this is, again, just the US numbers. We are talking about 200,000 cell sites in the United States. If we go to the 5G and mobile edge computing sites, we have about 2 million sites. So if you want to manage those even remotely, manually, there is no way you can cope with the services and introduction of the services. So Google is claiming to be able to introduce, based on their network, services within 4 days, whereas and as we heard from many service providers, it takes anywhere between 12 months to 18 months to introduce a new service. So I think that is not a lost game. So the reason why we believe we still we have a stake in the game is simply because in terms of context of IoT, with 50 billion devices by 2025, we will probably not have one single service provider to manage all these devices. So even Google will have issues, and I think that's where we're trying to make the case for going from what we call ecosystem to an ecosystem, which is what we believe in blockchain will be able to provide, not only us, but in the telecom space, but also many other areas. So that's why the title is Data-Driven Automation. So telecom operations are traditionally very complex. We know that. There's no case where we can say it's easy, because it's, as mentioned before, it's historically grown over a couple of years. The telecom industry is actually relatively old industry compared to other stuff, but as we see more and more challenges, we see telco cloud, we see, that was all mentioned before, it's becoming even more complex. So when I started 20 years ago with telco, it was, provisioning. We didn't have MPLS by then. We did have ATM, which was working properly and was working fine. Creating actually VPC, was a piece of cake. But now we are adding more and more complexity to the system. So we are talking about NFV, SDN, and as we all know, in telecom, we have the tendency to not finishing one job and starting with something new, and we're getting overwhelmed by the organizations we are dealing with right now. There are TIP, there are ETSI standards, there are MEF who are trying to standardize a lot of processes, APIs, and then we have ONAP, we have OSM. So the question is, as a customer, as a service provider, I would ask myself, which organization do I tend to? I think the question is, for us, is probably not the right question. The question is, obviously, automation is needed. How we do it is a different story. But are we ready for the next generation? Are we ready for, competing with Googles of this world? And I think that's, if you look at the existing networks and how they're built, the question is, can we survive? And again, I don't think there is a yes or no to that. Automation is not a necessity for 5 years from now. This is what we have been doing today. So I'm speeding up a little bit because I know you guys are going to have a drink, and this is cut off somehow. Okay. So it's talking about cloud, talking about edge again. Where does edge start? Where does it finish? I think Cliff was answering that to some extent, but we see more and more. The argument is 5G is good for autonomous vehicles. If you look at the European standards, it's not actually the technology which is difficult, it's the legacy which, you have to go through the European Union to standardize and actually have the legal entity to make that happen. So there is zero legal case for 5G right now. Wi-Fi can actually do a lot of things. So the complexity, and I agree with Cliff, as we said, a hybrid cloud environment and the issues around hybrid cloud, that's actually what people are talking about. So digital transformation, we talk about it, 50 billion devices. Who can manage those devices? I think, nobody. That's the answer. Nobody can do it on its own. We have to have this collaborative environment. We talked, I think the structured data or data in general was mentioned before. We believe, there are structured data and there are unstructured data. If you look at some of the numbers we have been looking at is how many data are structured today. That's just the APIs between two different databases. And if you, those are the standards which we can solve today, the so-called RPA. So, robotic process automation. That's what we use today in order to, automating a lot of processes which has nothing to do with the actually telecom services. So it's a voice service. You want to make sure that the voice service is up and running. That's why we use RPA or HR. Anything which is related to, telecom processes, we can manage very well with the so-called structured data. The problem is actually the unstructured data, where we see, if you look at some of the numbers again, out of C-executives, C-level executives within, I think, enterprise and telecom market, 50% believed their unstructured data is amounting for less than 10%. But the reality is actually 70% of those companies have already more than 50% unstructured data. So those unstructured data are emails. Those are the things which are coming, and we have no idea how to deal with that. The other issue is, as part of unstructured data, is the security, increasing security. So again, based on the numbers we have seen, 54% of enterprises dealing with, 70% of enterprises dealing with so-called DDoS attack within 3 to 5 hours. And that's an average how much time we need. So if you go into multi-cloud or telco cloud, that's one of the issues we have to face, because more and more telcos becoming IT service providers. And that's one of the challenges people see as a barrier to enter actually the telco cloud as such. So the other numbers are, if you look at, again, in unstructured data, we have, 80%, that's what the number is suggesting. Within 5 years, we will have unstructured data where we have absolutely no idea how to manage them. And if you look at the numbers which AT&T is publicly talking about 240 petabytes of data being transferred through the network. So obviously, that is calling for the new generation of OSS. So the old generation of OSS was built around voice. That's what we did all the time. So if you wanted to provision a service, mostly triple play or voice service, what you have to do is, activating all these things, meta switch, all the traditional services, or even DSL, or, optical layer. So those are the things which we are very good at. But in terms of managing 240 terabytes of data on a daily basis, which are mostly unstructured data, I think that's where we understand the complexity of the networks of the now and the future. So AI is something which comes up all the time. So a friend of mine said, if it's probably Python, is deep learning or machine learning. If it's AI, it's probably PowerPoint. So that's the difference between what people refer to most of the time AI. So again, it's like Cliff, I spend most of my time dealing with AI or so-called machine learning. So in fact, the first version of what we did was fuzzy coherent networks 20 years ago. Whatever we did by then, within 4 weeks, learning the data, understanding how to engineer those data, and doing actually what we were supposed to do, it took us 4 weeks. The same operation can be done today under 1 second. So it's clearly improving. We have more data, but I think in order to achieve the accuracy of what telcos expect, which is 5.9, we can't really rely on 4 weeks of data. We really need to have continuous data, and that's what the key differentiator is between AI, so-called AI, which is digital decision-making, and machine learning. So digital supply chain, again, is becoming more and more important as more and more services are becoming digital. And So, we see applications, telecom service providers becoming bundled services that provides applications, and, VNF is for the end customer, it doesn't really matter whether or not this is VNF or NFV in general, or is it application, they want to have a service up and running. So digital supply chain becoming more and more important as we are dealing with the new generation of users. I don't know how many of you guys have been dealing or have been burning cash on Bitcoin, probably a couple of you. So 3,000 is the numbers of initial Bitcoin blockchain, which was written 2008. So that's where the number is coming from, the 3,000, and that's where we believe, especially now with over 800 different cryptocurrencies, it's kind of hard, and I'm going to explain now why we think blockchain is one of the solutions we anticipate to introduce in the market, and not part of as just digital currency, rather than as part of BSS OSS transformation. So if you look at BSS market today, we are talking about $35 billion market, and if you ever had done anything with billing, it takes anywhere between good amount of time, let's say, in a post-processing, to do all these billing processes within 4 weeks. That's a cycle where you have to actually get the information from the system and send it to the customer. So one of the things we did as a proof of concept is introducing as a light version of blockchain, which was sending smart contracts to the customer and settling actually the invoices with the customer in real time. So we see BSS actually as the first approach for us introducing, for us as an industry, not us, because we don't really have any stake in billing. We are more an OSS company. But in terms of what BSS can do with blockchain, it's incredible what we have done, or as an industry, not we as a company. So we went from 2008, as you may know. How many of you guys know anything about blockchain? Okay, so more than I thought. So Bitcoin as an industry, or cryptocurrency as an industry, is going through a difficult phase right now. As you may know, by November 2017, Bitcoin achieved, I think, reached $20,000 per Bitcoin. Some of the developers we had previously in Ukraine were actually paid in crypto, but they're now switching to crypto-free zone, which is dollar. So it is incredible, the speculation which went through the cryptocurrency cycle. But the matter of fact is the technology behind it, blockchain, which is shared economy. And one of my friends was describing me, excuse my language, he said, blockchain is nothing else but a shitty distributed database. But this slow database has actually a lot of advantages, which is what I was talking about ecosystem. So when you want to share resources across your domain, and I think there was a couple of discussion before how to share resources across domain. We have actually done this with blockchain-based shared resource management across carrier, which we believe is the future for potentially many service providers. So you don't have to have a API defined, the API defined based on MEF, for instance, it would be always helpful, but the actual user's access right, that's something you can share across blockchain. So that's what we believe. In terms of blockchain combined with automation and combined with machine learning, what could be the future for us is very promising. Again, we believe billing systems are actually the first part where people see a lot of revolution coming. I think Shahar from PCCW, they have participated on a proof of concept with PCCW with, I don't know, I forgot, I think Holt, a couple of other companies where they did actually the settlement of invoices in real time based on inter-carrier exchange. So as you know, in North America, there between big carriers, there are always still Excel spreadsheet, which are 14 pages and 14 tabs, and they're being exchanged manually still. So blockchain was used in this proof of concept. I think it was done with a company called Clear. Yes, Clear. So, and they have done inter-carrier exchange settlement. So this is not just fiction. This is not what people dream of. We are getting to the point where blockchain is becoming more and more used by many service providers. We see, still not the peak. That's not the case yet, but we see more and more usage. So blockchain, if the the advantage of blockchain, if you don't know anything about blockchain, I'll just briefly explain it. If you change something in one ledger, it's being automatically auto-populated to other sites. So a couple of challenges we faced at the early beginning when we started 2 years ago was scalability for telcos. So blockchain absolutely is not scalable for what you know, for identity management. If you have many users, I think a company in US actually claiming to work with Telefonica to provide user management for 350 million subscribers. I mean, that's probably too hard to examine, but what blockchain is really good at is resource sharing across service providers, and that's what we can do already today, not for highly scalable solutions. The issue, apart from hyperscale automation, is security. So blockchain is extremely secure because everything you change, it can be manifested immediately within the blockchain. So no one can really go and alter the data. So the data is immediately available. So if you are changing something which you are not supposed to, someone else can really track it immediately. Having said that, blockchain, or Bitcoin, as you may have heard already, there's a consensus called, you know, everyone has to agree to what is being changed, but the 51% can easily be achieved by one function. So it comes back to the security or security orchestration, the so-called SIM SOAR, if you guys are familiar with the SIM. That's where people are getting worried with regards to blockchain and how scalable it can be. In terms of IoT collaboration, I think that's where we see, you know, a lot of use cases for blockchain. IOTA is one of the platforms, as I mentioned before. There are over 400 different platforms right now introduced. The most important one is IOTA, which is backed by Volkswagen and Audi in Germany. So the issue with blockchain and all these new technologies is because those kids who are doing actually the programming, they're on average 25 years old. So they have probably not a lot of sense for business cases and how scalable the platform should be, but there are a lot of innovation coming which we are, you know, following, and hierarchical blockchain, or as some call it, child chain, off-chain, on-chain. Those are, you know, traditional terms which are used nowadays. Future of telecom, I think what we already showcased is the multi-tenancy across multiple service providers, and again, you know, we call it service platform, where marketplace, where you can actually put on your unused, you know, resources, and someone else can go and grab it. Obviously, that's the easy formula for that. The hardest part is the automation across it. So what we have done, though, with RPA, with help of another company we are working on as a partner with RPA, we managed to get the services like I think Verizon and Colt was mentioned before. They use also blockchain for settlement, but we don't think blockchain for settlement is going deep enough. We need to go one step further, which is through automation across carriers. With that, I think I managed to torture you for 20 minutes. So thank you very much for your time. Any questions?